Alrighty, so after I recorded the attendance video, I looked at the work for this week, which I talked about there, and I realized it would actually make more sense to put the step one right after attendance and then do the implementation of the storage on the Thursday night item. And so that's what I'm going to do because it just doesn't make sense to have you code something yet that you're not going to need in here. And that gives us the focus for what came out of 4.2. All right, so let me show you after going through these directions today, and I'll lead you through it, and I may make some changes just as I see things that don't align. All right, so I'm going to go into step one. Okay, so now that you've done the changes to your HTML and CSS, now we're going to go through and we're going to make the JavaScript align with the work that you've done in attendance, okay? And in that process, we're also going to end up changing, instead of the calculator, we'll call it decision. Instead of results display, we'll call it UI. And you might wonder, why are we changing the name? The functionality of those files will be the same as it is now, but it's just good to not be like to see and to reflect on what these actually do, not so much the names. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I'm going to recommend, and I'll come back and look at some of this. So I'm going to show you how I recommend you work through this, because what you're about to do, what you've already done with the attendance, is you have already broken the code. And I didn't say this in attendance, and I probably should have, and it's okay. Like, let me show you what I did. Matter of fact, I'm going to move over to my VS Code. So what I did in my VS Code, where I had shown you my demo 5, because I had already worked on step 1, I ended up just copying over the HTML and the CSS. Okay, so just these two files right here from my work. And so what that means is I should have pretty much what you should have, because at this point I didn't have you make any other changes. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the changes I made in the HTML and in the CSS, and already I've gotten an error. So what you're going to do is work through this process, because part of what you needed to do, and you'll hear me talk about this, I already did in attendance, is you should have changed some of the HTML to then reflect your form, right? So actually this first error is telling us that. Matter of fact, and so here's what I'm going to recommend you do. To start, I'm going to go back to my VS Code. I'm going to go into my index file, okay? And then what I'm going to do, because this is all the old stuff for now, right? I'm just going to go and I'm going to hit command forward slash. And what that's going to, oh, actually, that might not be, let's see if I do it again. Yeah, it works. Okay, so command forward slash. So what happens here is if there's already a comma or a forward slash, it just puts another one, but I can undo those. Okay, so now what does this do? So A, it gets rid of the error, okay? And why does it do that? Because it takes everything out, right? It takes, only thing that's showing up is the JavaScript. And here's the deal. In the HTML, we had it as a module. So even as a module, even though it doesn't import anything, and we have the defer, it still works totally fine, right? And we're going to bring back all this code. So here's what I recommend, is going through it, you know, piece at a time. Because what I ended up doing is I did it kind of an all-in-one step. It took me like an hour and a half, but that takes a bit more knowledge than we collectively have, but you may have. So I'm not telling you have to go through it like this, just showing you the process I recommend. So the first thing I would do here, and notice how, let's go back to the instruction, you are going to use the form handler. But now the form handler, right, and this is what I say, you know, comment on all that app.js stuff, right, and update the code as needed, right, and you'll still have all this on here. And actually, I even realized in doing this, really what you want to do here is just start by commenting it, because it's really the form.js that you're going to work on. I just left some things in here to give you, right, some overview of what you're doing here. So let's actually do this. Now, let's actually, now, by the way, I could select the command forward slash and it uncomments it. So now I could start troubleshooting, right, that. But in order to do that, well, I would have to come look at where is that where is that code being used, right? Where is that code in my specific code base right now? So I'd have to look through here and I'd go, okay, oh, it's right here. So then what I would do is I would actually leave that and I would start looking, work my way. I would leave these because we're going to come back to these. And now I would start working my way through here, right? I'd uncomment this. These are just comments. And now I'd be like, okay, I need to make an array that is specific to my decision, right? That's what I ended up doing in my step one. So this is what you're going to end up doing. So it wouldn't be footprints. It'd be whatever, it wouldn't be carbon footprints. It would be whatever you're going to name it, because this is part of the thing that you're going to do here is you're going to name this, right? You're going to give it your, and I'm decision name. Now actually I'm going to do this right, and I'm going to do it camel case, okay, right? Okay. So again, this is not what you give it. This is your specific name. I think I ended up calling it, matter of fact, I'll just look real quick just to give you the idea, workout entries. Now again, right, you name this whatever is specific to yours. So I'm like, okay, now that I have that, now I would say, okay, right? And this is where I would want to update this documentation. I didn't do it here, but you would want to. It's just helpful to go back and look at it, right? So now I'd have to say, okay, reference to the main. Okay, so I would want to update that content. And here now, I would say, okay, so I'm getting element by ID carbon footprint. And I know that in the previous step, when I was in here, right, I had modified, you should have, and I did modify this. And this is where I was saying these are really important. So if I come back in here and I go, oh, you know what? Actually, it's this. It's my, right? And then I would say probably, right, this. And actually, I'd get rid of that. And let's see if that's actually what I named it. Oh, I did, right? I did do it that way. Okay, so that I'm telling you what I actually did here. So then I would look at this and I would go, okay, right? So now, oh, I got to do it twice because evidently that was already commented out. Okay, so now, I hope you get what I'm doing here is I'm going to go all the way through the code to the point that it hits that form handler, because just me uncommenting it, right, at this point, right, and then I need to get the code working all the way up to that. And I'm not going to walk you through because I'm just giving you the idea. And by the way, I didn't make you. This is a good time to say this. I didn't make you change, and I didn't even talk about it. You can leave. There's definitely code in here you can leave the way it is, right? Clear form button. Yeah, no problem. There's nothing specific to the decision that would require that, right? And so I could look at this. So okay, now I'm coming to my first decision here. Ooh, right here, right? So I could say, or my first function. And now I want to think about how is this function called? Okay, this function is called most likely by my init, right, on my DOM load. So I could come down here and look, okay, what do I need to change here, right? So now you can approach it in the way that in whatever way, but ultimately you want this all to be specific naming to your decision, right? So no more carbon footprint, no more household, right? So it would be whatever you called it. You still could totally use new entry, form data. I ended up calling this decision results. Okay, because that made sense to me. You don't need to change this. But I guess I want you to just get the idea of you change anything that you saw was a carbon footprint specific to your decision specific. And what that really means, and this is part of what I would have graded, is I would have went through on attendance and looked to see if you updated all the things that I covered in there. And if you didn't, you'll want to do that before you start into this work. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go through it because this is where you really take what you're learning. Okay, and this is actually another way we're going through the code you've already done to see how well you understand it. Okay, so Now, on the form handler, this is like I said, you would get all the way to the form handler, and then you would bring up the form handler, and now you have to go in here. Now, by the way, this one, oh, that's the one from my old one, or my modified one. And this is also, by the way, I just want to be clear, way I'm demonstrating this, right, is because I had to create this folder. This is the folder you will be working in. And remember, the code from where you started was here. And the reason I say that this was important, and this is if you open it, make sure you're clear on which one you're modifying. That can bite you really bad. It bit me a couple times where I thought I was modifying my decision and I was modifying down here. So just be careful when you're doing that. So in your form, you can already see, okay, listen, I got to modify this. I got to modify this because this is going to be a query selector on that household members, right? So then you'll have to look at your whatever first input you had, this was mine, and then you'll have to modify the code accordingly, right? So in this case, we're not yet writing code, we're just modifying code for our decision, our specific decision concept or content, right? And what this does, again, is it makes you go through the code. And this is good, right? And some of it you'll get rid of. Like, so in this case, right, I didn't need square footage. I didn't need his apartment. I didn't need these things, so I got rid of them. Okay. And then I went through and I'm like, oh, you know what? I did use, because I used temperature outside, which were radio buttons, so I could still use this function. Totally okay. But I ended up having to, of course, modify this because this gets, and I didn't modify the name, get form inputs. I don't think I did I? Let me go look. I don't think I did. No, I didn't, right? So I didn't do that, but I did return, right? I had to modify my return object, right? My object literal to be specific for my 3 inputs. Okay, so I think you get the idea. I hope this is enough, right? So now you're going to go through here, return your data object, make sure everything works in the module, right? And then you'll keep going through. Now, on the decision, this is where this was called the calculator before. So the first thing you'll do is rename this file, right? So in here, right, and this is actually where you'll end up writing the most code. This is where I wrote the most code, was in here. And now what I'm about to show you is how I approached it, but trust me, this is your decision, and I should not see the approach I took in the way that you do it. And I know that this is probably the most challenging. So this is where reaching out for help, right? And thinking about this process, you can start with it a little more. Matter of fact, I'm not happy with my version, but I'm okay with it for now. So let's talk about what this is, right? So this is your core logic. So where we did the calculator for the carbon footprint, now this is going to be your decision. And this is where you will write new code, right, for your decision-making logic. Do your best to write several functions that break down your logic and return values to help you organize your decision-making logic, right? So because here's the deal, when I did this, this is true. When I did this, and I'll just show you mine, but again, I preface this by saying I'm not showing you what to do. I'm telling you how I did it, right? So when I did this, I was thinking about how I was going to go about instead of calculating, I'm determining my workout, right? And what's being passed in is the data from the form, right? And then I have little helper functions that I have done that return values. This is identical design pattern from what we saw. Okay, and now we're just saying, how do I adapt this for my decision? So instead of points, I called mine a factor. So my energy score factor, my day factor, my temperature factor, that all went into making a decision workout. Now, I am already planning on my next version of what this is going to be, right? So notice I have and I already realized after writing this, I'm like, duh, this was the perfect time to actually write probably a switch statement. But I started with an if, else if, because that's what I was thinking about. And when I was looking at my energy, I had to remember, oh yeah, I start with my larger one, my greater than 85, I return a string, right? So I ended up returning strings here that I then just put together to return what my decision was. But in addition to returning the decision, right? I actually ended up returning also all of the factors that ran into that decision. So again, do your best here, because again, this is the most challenging, in my opinion. Part of this is also being consistent with the way you made the changes in the attendance. And part of this is taking the concept of writing your specific decision and creating the code. Okay? All right. So again, commit messages. This is part of how you get graded for what you did here, right? And comments. And this is where taking, some of the comments that were in here before and modifying them. And I'm not giving you the best example, but I'm giving you the idea. Okay, so again, where this is the calculator, you could end up just renaming it. And when you do that in the app.js, then you'll have to change this. Instead of calculator, you'll have to change both what the variable in the app.js will be and where is it pointing. And the same with results, right? Instead of results displayed, it needs to now be called UI. And again, the reason I'm doing that is not to throw you off, but just to say you have to know how these things all work together. It really, really is important. And again, we're just basically going through what you've learned to see how well you've translated that. Okay. So then you'll end up making, through this process, you'll end up working, of course, all the way through the app.js. Okay. So you'll end up working all the way through, getting, this piece by piece done. Again, it helps you rethink how this thing came together. Okay, and you can make, and by the way, you could definitely make more than one commit here, because remember, your commits are your way of showing me how you're working through the work. And you do need to keep the design patterns that we've learned, because honestly, I'm going to take Google at its word that it's a much better coder than I am. But I did learn a ton and continue to learn a ton by doing this work. Okay, so the last thing is, I had you start the documentation. I said you were going to have to finish it by this point. So you will. You'll need to finish this up. Draft this. I did definitely do some drafts, and I had AI help me with the wording here, but you definitely need to list the inputs used, your decision focus. And by the way, this is a great place to write a little pseudocode about what your app's actually doing, a brief description, right? Give it a title. For me, I think I would probably call it, "What does my workout look like today?" That would be true for me. And then what you're going to deliver, right? So you're going to have all these things. So you should have an index, a CSS. Oh, actually, that should be app. I'll fix that. You will have still, that won't change, but the code in it will. You'll have a new file that used to be called calculator. You'll have another new file that used to be called results, right? So again, I should see this through your commits as you go through. And then make sure, this is going to be way important, is that you have working code here, right? Okay, so then this is how I'll grade it, right? Do the commits align with the work completed? Did you update the code to be specific for your concept? So when I look through there, I shouldn't see any more references to the carbon footprint, right? Does your code produce, now this is where I'm going to give you a little bit of a choice, right? So in other words, we do return the object, right? On the decision, right? So let me go here. So on the decision, and let me just go to mine, right? So you do go to the decision, you return the object, and you can, at this point, if you're like, you've thrown up your hands like, I'm so done, right? And you want to just console log out that, the object, you can do that. But just know, when we get to step 2 in 2 weeks, you'll end up needing to do that, okay? So I would say, if you don't get to it now, as you move through the next couple of weeks, think about doing it, and this is where getting help can be really, really helpful. Okay, so 25 points for that. Did you complete the documentation? Submit your commit history for your step 1 folder. Okay. I'm going to just say this. I know looking at something like this can be overwhelming. I honestly felt a little overwhelmed when I started working on it, because I had to take what I had created with Google, and I actually needed to do it myself. And I learned so much more just by doing it. And this is where if you're taking what you're learning through the code alongs, right, and and the checkpoints and the attendance stuff, and you're seeing how well you're translating, and this is really where most people need some help. So I hope you reach out early and get it. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I think I'm almost ready to release the new content that we'll see in our next step, which will be doing local storage. All right, thanks so much. Talk to you later.